First of all, John, Mark, Tammy, thank you so much for being here. Thank you
so
much for
such a joy to be
working
here.
so hard for us on a Saturday.
Oh,
in
it's
your
a joy.
Crazy, busy schedule.
I meant it, man. It's an honor to be here with you and with you guys. And so much love and respect for Tim and your leadership and the church here. I know not all of you are part of Reality LA, but a ton of respect for you guys. And it's fantastic to be here.
It's been amazing.
This is my wife, Tammy, by the way.
So this is
Hello.
Tammy Boomer.
Z Cuban. Nice of you to be here on time. That was
Thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah.
I came with
I'm
you.
just
so.
I'm just kidding. Come on.
I think so many questions were actually to you, Tammy. Like, how do you deal with this guy? Like, what do you do? So before we get into the questions, the biggest question we knew would be asked is, what about same-sex attraction? What about that? So knowing this, and actually when we planned out this weekend, instead of addressing that today, we've actually dedicated an entire time slot, which is tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. here in this room. Pastor Jeremy and I, Pastor John Mark won't be with us, but Pastor Jeremy and I will be teaching a whole class on this together, as well as some testimony. So we really wanted to give it sufficient time and space. And so for the many of you that asked those questions, we love you, and we want to take plenty of time to walk with you through that. It is a subject that is very near and dear to my heart, and very near and dear to the hearts of many in this church. I hope everyone in this church. So I just want you to know that. That's a disclaimer. So we're really going to focus on some of the things that were hit on today, but that's happening tomorrow, 2:30. You don't have to sign up, just show up 2:30 to about 4 o'clock. So I just wanted to make that announcement straight away. So first of all, it's so good to have you guys here in Los Angeles. You guys being from Portland, it always sounds to us like it's this magical city where this thing called rain happens. And actually, this morning I picked him up, and they were staying downtown, and we're driving, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna drive by the LA River, and he laughs. Like, why did he laugh? He's like, isn't river like an overstatement, you know? I think, what did you say?
I think I said it was a sewer.
Yeah. So there's that. It's good to have you here from Portland. You also just asked if we could recycle our water bottle, so I was like, this is great. All you need is a beard, and we're in. So there were so many questions, and a lot of them were excellent. A lot of them are deeply personal. And Tammy, it's great to have you speak in on some of these issues as well, and I might chime in now and again. I tried to, I'll try. We'll see what happens. One of the great things about having somebody else teach is that I get to defer, so it's great. Yeah. I can just watch it all happen. But I tried to order them just with an arc, going from some of the questions asked in a state of singleness to then dating, what about engagement, and then what about some of the hardships and difficulties and challenges within marriage. So one question, and there were many like it, is I've been single for a while, and it feels like all I've been doing is waiting. I know there's a purpose within the present, but what do you do with that idea that God wants to work in you before you get married? What it does in me is it creates jealousy and misconceptions about all my friends who are engaged or getting married, like, oh, you're more together or you're more mature, and that's why you're now getting married. What do I do with this? What about me?
I think the first thing I would say, babe, I don't know about you, but is right now you are becoming your future. And so you are becoming the kind of person that is ready to be a husband or a wife. And we all know that getting into a dating relationship, meeting somebody, falling in love, getting married is no sign at all of maturity, right? So it is not a sign of like, God, oh, you're ready for it. Here, God hooks you up, right? It is more just how life works. And so those that, like my wife and I, who that happens to really, really young, and you think, man, how can that happen to so-and-so, and they have it all, and they're married, and blah, blah, blah. Like, that has pros and cons to it. Like, there's pros, and we grew up together, and there's a lot of good in that. You know, I think we were shaped as people together. But then it has a lot of cons to it. Like, let's be honest, I was incredibly immature when we got married. And maybe I'm not sure if I've changed all that much. You know what I mean? So, and then for many of you, if it's the opposite story, if you marry on the later side of the spectrum, you're going to be at an incredible spot where you have the maturity to walk into that. And so my only reminder, and you know this, but is life does not start when you get married or when you start dating somebody. Life starts the second that you say yes to the kingdom of God and you start to follow Jesus. And when we talk about waiting, there's a difference between waiting for and waiting on. there's a difference between waiting for, and this is if you're just kind of waiting around for Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or marriage or whatever, versus waiting on, where you're patient, you don't rush ahead, and you wait on God and his work in your life, but you are still actively living into God's calling over you. And I would also just say embrace, there is so much that you can do single that you can't do married, and I'm pro-marriage, I love it. But there's so much you can do as a single person. Jesus was single, Paul was single, the prophets for the most part were single. There's so much that you can do to fold your life into kind of the larger God story as a single person that my heart goes south whenever I see people who are kind of just single, pining away, so-and-so's married, I'm not, and just kind of walking in circles rather than becoming who God's made them to be, doing things that they can do single, they can't do married, and trusting, waiting on God, not around, but waiting on God for his time,
Amen.
And I would just add to that if you're not happy single, you will not be happy married. So I think a lot of times, especially I hear this with women, mostly because that's who I have the deeper conversations with.
That's right.
Okay. Anyway, I'm nodding.
You're not going to be happy even when you're married.
I just think that, especially we have chick flicks and just so much of culture to women specifically is romance oriented, and so you think happily ever after starts after you get married, or when you're in a relationship. And I just think that when you're unhappy and you get married, you're still unhappy. You're just unhappy. But if you can find joy in where God has put you now, then when you're married, you will be a delight to your husband. You'll enjoy the good parts of marriage, and then the harder parts won't derail you. So I think just focusing on contentment in the now, and like John Mark was saying, just becoming the person God's calling you to be will make you that much more of a better spouse, but also just a better human. You'll be a happier person and a way more of the kind of person that probably your spouse is actually looking for.
Yeah, and don't watch the Titanic 100 times.
Yeah. Well, it's such an unrealistic, I feel chick flicks is sometimes kind of women's porn. We are addicted to the idea that a man is just the end all of our life. They're just it. You find this man
What?
who'll
You don't think I am?
I love you, but
Bye. Disclaimer.
I mean,
That's actually going to be her book. I love you, but. ... The real story behind Loveology.
What was Jonathan Wesley's wife's book, Marriage to a Difficult Man?
Yes. Best title ever.
So awesome.
I think that if you're gonna watch those movies, you have to do it, but with in your mind that this isn't real. This is you're watching vampires, okay? When you're you know what I'm talking about,
Vegan
girls.
vampires.
You're watching vampires. You're watching
It's the Northwest.
It's a fantasy. They might as well have a tail. This is not real. This is not what it looks like in real life, and it was never supposed to look like this in real life. So, yeah.
Yeah, your value and your worth does not depend on your marital status.
Yeah.
You are a human being created in the image of God, remade in the image of Christ. And I love preaching that fact, whether in singleness or marriage. It's ultimately about the mission. It's about, you said, the kingdom of God. And I think it was Thomas Merton who said, life is a search for the unfinished symphony. We're always looking for I just want the symphony to be finished, but it's only finished in Christ. And that's got to be the focus in singleness and in marriage.
Well said.
Now you talked obviously just now about dating, and there are a lot of complexities in our 21st century, especially in the digital realm. So a lot of questions were things like, what about online dating? What about just the whole phenomena of social networking? How does that perhaps make things maybe more challenging or more difficult? What is your advice or wisdom or counsel with the whole idea of dating, online dating and social media, and how that's played a factor into people dating, getting to know each
I
other?
think, like I said before, this is well into the realm of opinion. So obviously the Bible says nothing about online dating, right? So it's not right or wrong. So John Mark's opinion, and I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, is that online is a great way if you want to meet people, and that's it. So basically what you see, whether it's an online dating or whether in social media, you can have an introduction to a person, but you do not actually see who that person is, right? So social media, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or some online platform, it is where we curate an image of ourselves, even if we don't mean to, even if it's at a subconscious level. We curate an image of ourselves that is not based in reality, whether we mean to or not, to make ourselves look better than we really are. And in particular, some of us aren't even fully self-aware to know who we actually are, right? And especially
I don't know why
you're
you were
young.
pointing at me.
Yeah.
When you just
Some of us, I don't know who, but some of us are not self-aware. So in particular, if you're young, I mean, psychologically, most people don't even become self-aware until the age of 22. We married at 19 and 21. And then even after that, it's a lifetime. I mean, I'm 34 now, and we spent this last summer, had a 3-month sabbatical. I felt like relearning who we are all over again, you know? So you don't even necessarily know who you are as well as somebody who's dating you might or engaged to be married. So all that to say, I have no problem with online dating if you want to meet somebody or it's a great, you know, oh, great, let's go grab coffee after that, as long as it immediately goes to real life, doing life together, seeing what that person is like on good days, bad days, when they're all done up and they look fantastic, and when they just got fired and they're mad or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, your
And
online
so-
profile is like the first date. You're always putting your best foot forward.
Yeah,
It's like,
that's
okay. What happens?
It's
after?
a resume.
Yeah.
It's not a picture of who you actually are. It's a social resume, and so I'm not against it at all as far as like a way to meet people. I think most of us would prefer to meet people naturally, organically, but that's fine. I mean, whatever is your style.
Yeah.
But I think at some point it has to transition into real life.
Yes. Tammy, maybe you could answer this one. As a woman who's just being hung out with by a guy, how would you recommend that I... We actually got many texts like this. As a woman who's currently just being hung out with by a guy, how would you recommend that I address the guy who's hanging out, lots of air quotes happening, the guy who's just hanging out with me constantly? Like how do you address that? You touched on it a little bit earlier. Tammy, almost all those questions came from women in the room. I know that because the gender was very specific. A guy is hanging out with me. How would you address that?
Well, I hope he's here and that he heard this, because then
You're about to
hopefully...
get slapped right
Yeah.
now. Subtext.
But I mean, I would just say you could do it. It depends on your personality, but at a certain point, I just think, you can jokingly, say like, hey, there's some other guys that I'm friends with that are really looking to hang out with me. What do you think about that? Are you down with that? Because according to you, we're just hanging out, So, but I think maybe if you don't wait around for a guy who's just saying he's hanging out with you.
Come on.
Like seriously, like a lot of the time I've seen, it seems like as soon as a guy thinks you're ready to walk away, they kind of realize what they have. And so I would just say, for you to figure out who you are. Do you like who you are with him? Do you like the direction he's going in? Or is he the type of guy who's pursuing you to the point where you feel like he's asking some of these questions? And if he's not, then I would just start being, maybe even just having an honest conversation. And you could, if it's to the point where you feel like you can talk about it, maybe just say, hey, I know we've been hanging out, but in order for me to stick around, I feel like there needs to be a little bit more direction happening, because otherwise I just can't wait around with you, like for you forever. But you're a great guy, but this is kind of, I'm letting you decide which direction. But I would not put my life on hold. Like, I feel like I've met so many women that are just literally like, well, it's been, a year, and then it's been a couple years, but we just really like hanging out. And I'm like, he needs to like pursue you, or like just be straight up about it. So I wouldn't be, I don't know. Yeah. I guess I would just encourage you to like sit down, maybe just have an honest conversation. But do not wait around, because like the guy, a great fit for you maybe wanting to hang out with you, and while you're busy hanging out with this other guy, you miss your opportunity.
As my grandma said, run just fast enough to get caught.
There you go.
Did she really say that?
She said that all the time. Marisu.
I would say if you're the guy, some guys, and this would apply to women as well, because the reverse situation does happen, just less frequently. If you're the guy, there's one problem is you might be oblivious, and you need to be informed, and so maybe a good conversation will inform you at some point. But I would say this, I know it's really fun to pick on the guys who are doing that, but I would actually say this as a pastor. You don't realize like the power that you are, with the power with which you are affecting another person if you're just leading them on, and if you're just trying to get like benefits of like, oh, I feel affirmed because they're attractive and I don't really want to go anywhere, but I like them being like an accessory to my life. Like, that is so not the way of Jesus.
Yeah.
That is so not loving. It is so not kind. It is so not any of the fruit of the Spirit. And so, I mean, it would be easy to just make fun of that typical guy as a caricature, but honestly, if there are those of you who are doing that, has nothing to do with the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And you need to be honest about that, and you should probably have that conversation. I just think.
And if you're a girl and you are doing that, because like from that perspective, I would just say to you, like, like the guy that you're hanging out with, if you like him, he should know. Like, he should be like totally confident that if he says, hey, can I take you out for a real date where you get dressed up and I take you out to dinner, that he knows, like, beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're going to be like, heck yeah, I'm totally, like, I'm going to be ready early, Like, which for me says a lot, because I'm never ready early.
Ready early, imagine that.
It's true.
It's true. But he should know, like, you should be giving all the signs so that he has all the confidence. You got to help the guys out, 'cause sometimes girls can be intimidating.
You're scary.
And that's where I love, he goes more into it in the book, but the whole role of friends and community is really helpful, because sometimes we just don't see things and need your friends like, what are you doing? We need that. But it's interesting what you just said leads to the next question is, how soon is too soon to tell someone that you're romantically interested? Like, is it first date? Like, do you just lay it all out? Like, how soon is too soon to tell someone that you are romantically interested in them?
Oh, I think you should say it right away. If you're a guy, and if you're a girl, you should just be like loud and clear with your signals. Oh yeah, that's amazing. Good eye contact.
All the guys are like, wait, that's a signal?
Yeah.
Write it down.
Eye contact.
Guys, if you're saying something and she's acting interested, that's a signal.
Yeah.
Trust me.
That's like all the men in the room. Define signal. It's a useful tool that you need for life.
And girls will love you guys if you're straight up right away. I'm serious. All the girls love it. I cannot tell you how many times I hear from a girl, he actually said he likes me and he like wants to like pursue me. What do you think? I'm like, yes. That guy needs a pat on the back. So girls like that when you're straight up.
Yeah. Do you think there's a danger of being a little too overbearing?
Said in the creepy voice.
Yes.
Of course, the problem is like
let's get one thing straight, like that kind of.
all the wrong guys are really serious, right? All the wrong guys like, hey, you, right? Yeah, I mean, no, only if you're creepy.
Yeah. So don't be creepy.
And you're gonna be creepy anyway. So for the other guys, no. I mean, I think be yourself. Some of you guys are really type A and go for it, and others of you are more laid back. That's great. So be who you are, how you're wired, made by God. I think the point is, like, you be the one to risk. You be the one to risk rejection, not her, and step out, and that's it.
Is doubt a normal feeling for a dating relationship? And if so, how do you deal with that? So I'm imagining they're like, okay, maybe we've gone on a couple of dates, or maybe it's actually been longer than that. Maybe it's like 6 months, and I'm starting to have some doubts. Like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I don't think I would really hesitate to say there's yes or no, because so much of that is based on your personality, So on one level, I would say, if you've been dating for a year and you still don't know, then you know. Right?
Ooh.
But at the same time, I would say that with like asterisk, there are exceptions to the rule all over the place. And so one of my family members was dating this amazing guy and they dated for a couple of years, and they just could not make up their mind. And it's like, we were all saying, come on, like, he's great, but clearly you don't really know what you want in a husband or whatever, or if it's the right fit. So you guys should just, I remember saying, you guys need to break up. You don't know what you want. That means it's not the right fit. And they ended up getting married and have a fantastic marriage. And so I think a lot of it is based upon your personality. Some of us are like really, like I'm that, like I know what I want and I know it right away, boom, let's go for it. Other people just deliberate and like, you know what I mean? So I guess I would say, is doubt something intrinsic to your personality? Are you that kind of person who, like, you sit down at a restaurant, you finally figure out what to order, and then the entire time you're waiting for your meal, you're like, was that the right decision? I don't know, was that the right decision? You know? Then if you're doubting, like, your meal, then the odds are you're gonna doubt, should I give myself to this person until I die? You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it is, like, the most major decision you will probably ever make, other than, you know, whether or not you follow Jesus, and maybe what you do for a career. And so I think it's right and fitting, especially based on your personality, to doubt it. But if you're the type of person who doesn't doubt, you're like, no, I know what I want, and you've been dating for a long time and you still don't know, unless if you're really young and you're still kind of growing up. Other than that, I would say, yeah, that's probably a sign that maybe this isn't a bad person, but this is just not the right fit.
That's also, though, where community comes in really
Yes.
handy, and family is like, people should be able to speak in to that, and you can process with people
Don't make the decision alone,
yeah,
right?
who know you and see what your relationship is like, and then you can, you know what I mean, you can gauge sometimes from that, like somebody who knows you really good, you want voices to speak into that, because maybe the doubts you're feeling are huge red flags, actually, and your community will say that. Or maybe they're just like kind of silly things, you know, like your list. A lot of times processing that with people you trust is really important.
Yeah.
I would add to like when John Mark said a year, some of you are like, whoa. I'd say it depends on what happens in a year. Like my wife and I met when we were going to Bible college together, and so we actually saw each other almost every day. So it was actually, it was a fairly quick process to where we were able to kind of discern because we spent so much time together. Whereas some of you, maybe the person you're dating, you actually don't get to see that much, and it might take a little bit longer. But I think the point is, like, at a decent amount of time, and you've had plenty of like different life experiences, like little moments, like you should be able to formulate, you know, a trajectory of where that person's character is going. And I think that's huge. Now the whole dating process brings up a really heavy question. I know that you've shared a little bit about your past. You were both virgins when you were married. Here's the question. I have a sordid, promiscuous sexual past, and I haven't been in a Christian relationship since I came back to the Lord. When the time comes, if the Lord calls me to a relationship, a marriage, how much of my past do I share? How many details do I share?
Yeah, I think that's one of the main questions that I feel like, at least at our church, I'm always wrestling with people, you know what I mean, as we get together and coffee or whatever. Like, man, I feel like I get that question all the time. It's always I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that, because it's so based upon who you are, what your story is, who it is that you're dating. First, I would say, like, not on your first date, like, just want you to know, here are the, you know, why am I still single at 40, you know? So not right away. You want to, I think the level of your openness and vulnerability and intimacy with a person is based on the level of commitment in your relationship. So the more and more that your relationship is moving towards any kind of commitment, whether it's engagement and then marriage, the more open that you should be with somebody. You don't want to have it all come out like in engagement or in your first year of marriage or 10 years in when your marriage is not doing well. And oh my gosh, there's all this stuff, you know? And so I would say not right away, but I would say, this is John Mark's opinion here, closer to the front end than the back end of a relationship, when you feel like your relationship has the bandwidth to be able to handle just the telling of the truth. And when it comes to how much do you tell, not tell, of course that's a paradigm, and I would do that with counseling, with therapy, or pastoral help, or really good community help around you. And I know there are a lot of people that just want to kind of say, you know what, you're a new creation, it's over, it's gone, it's not a part of who you are, move on. But the reality is that we carry that stuff with us. And I would say that secrets kill intimacy more than sin does. And so having, a secret from your past will do more damage to intimacy in your marriage than actually going through a mistake that you made and experiencing healing and love. And that can actually be one of the most beautiful moments in a marriage when two people get to be like Jesus toward each other. And we have a lot, because we have a church, we have all these sorts of people that grew up in the church and then all sorts of people that came to faith in Jesus a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever. So we have a lot of people that marry, and maybe one of them grew up in the church and maybe is even a virgin, and the other person has this kind of gnarly sexual promiscuous past. And so a lot of times we navigate that, you know what I mean? And these two people coming together and what that looks like and how challenging that is. But it's also just an incredibly redemptive moment for somebody to be like Jesus to their spouse or their future spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it is. So maybe that answer is a little bit too ambiguous for you, but I would shy away from saying like, this is right, this is what's wrong. But on that pendulum, I think I would always encourage very graciously, with wisdom, with the help of a counselor or a pastor or a community, like to not hide. So I don't think you need details from your past, but you don't want secrets in your past either.
Yeah.
And so I would avoid details, but I would also avoid secrets.
Yeah. I would speak to that a little bit. Most of you, many of you are probably in our church, and so most of you probably heard my story, probably too many times, but that was exactly my experience meeting Lindsay. Was I had a very sexually promiscuous past. I paid for an abortion. I knew that as Lindsay and I were getting to know each other, I knew that if we were going to get married, I'd have to get tested for STDs, and I had to tell her all this. And she had never had, she was a virgin, never had sexual relationships and whatnot. And it really was that. It was as the relationship progressed and was becoming mature, and I knew that it was heading in that direction. I knew that I had to tell her, and I'm not going to tell every single, in this month I did this, and in this year I did that. But I was very upfront about it. I said, I want you to know I lost my virginity when I was about 14 years old. I have paid for an abortion, like everything. And for those of you, whoever asked this question, it's one of the greatest opportunities to experience the gospel.
Yeah.
Because you are not defined by your past, you're defined by Christ. And I remember being so nervous of telling Lindsay that, and when I did, I was crying and just, here, this is what I did. And she just looked at me and said, I see you through the blood of Christ. And we've been married for we're going on 14 years next year, and she's never hung it over my head. But I was honest, and it's to this day one of the greatest experiences of a picture of the gospel to me. Yeah. So I think you shouldn't keep secrets, because I recently talked to a man who has been married for 10 years and didn't tell his wife until this year that he had an abortion in the past. And then that just, his wife, it wasn't so much the fact of what he did in his past, it's that for 10
secret.
years
Yeah.
that he never told her. So I would just say that, you don't have to share every gruesome detail, but in Christ, you actually have the boldness to be able to talk about that.
And the freedom and the space to do that. Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And it's and I would say if you're on the receiving end of that, if somebody's about to share that with you, and maybe that is not your past, I would say this to you. You have one of the most incredible opportunities to show the love of Christ to them and to be a picture of the gospel. I will never forget that. And many of you have the opportunity to do that. So pastorally, I would say that. That's huge. How did you guys approach the topic of marriage with your parents when you said you decided you wanted to get married and you were proverbially 12?
Yeah.
Which we took as a metaphor for being young. Yes. Yeah. Although you said it a couple times, 21 or 12.
Somebody who came in late, they're like, seriously?
Yeah, why am I at this
Arranged
conference?
marriage, it's biblical, come on.
So how did you approach the topic with your parents?
A long time ago. I mean, my parents are kind of pretty hands-on, and so I wasn't living at home, I was living in another city, but they were way too involved for my taste. But I think in a good way. Now in retrospect, at the time, it kind of felt like, leave me alone. But in retrospect, I think they were incredibly helpful. And my mom in particular really walked me through what I should be looking for. I was really young, so I remember she really walked me through what I should be looking for in a woman, and then continued to say, that's what Tammy is, that's what Tammy is, that's what Tammy is, Your family, maybe not so much. I don't know.
I think we dated in front of our families, though. We spent a lot of time. His family wasn't where we lived at the time, but my family was, so we dated a lot. In my parents' living room and kind of hanging out.
Not hanging out like in the other way.
Not hanging
Yeah.
out. We were actually
Hanging out.
yes.
Yeah. While dating.
While
just
dating.
to clarify.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say just we're pretty straight up from the beginning that we were like googly-eyed, like really googly-eyed, young.
Yeah.
Kids really, but and they saw that and we were talking about it because we were choosing to keep our relationship pure and stuff. That's really, really challenging when you're in love. So they were supportive of the direction we were headed. They just didn't want us to be too young, even though we were really, really young.
I think what I would say is, depending on
your family dynamic,
the maturity and the
too.
health of your family dynamic, the more your parents can be involved, the better,
Yeah.
A bunch of you have families that are like, why aren't you guys sleeping together? That's so stupid. You need to know if you're a good fit. Like, don't listen to your parents, okay? Seriously, that happens a lot. Like, I have these kids will come to me in my church, 22 years old, and we're not sleeping together. We're trying to follow Jesus, but our parents are after us. Why do you not sleep and live together? And so we're like, what do we do? Do we honor our parents? No. So, so if that's your mom and your dad,
honor them, but don't listen.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Don't
Yes.
take their
Sorry.
advice.
Yes. Thank you. Honor them. You know what I'm saying. So, or maybe you don't. I was 12. What can I say? But if your mom and your dad follow Jesus, and that doesn't mean they have, Solomonic wisdom, but if they follow Jesus, to that degree, I'd say the more involved they can be in your relationship, the better, whether they live here in LA County or somewhere else. I think ideally that's God's vision, is that a family is healthy and thriving, and that man leaves father and mother, and so obviously father and mother are connected to that whole thing, and
In that so once engaged, that's actually kind of really two questions about engagement. One, very straightforward, is it okay to have sex during engagement? And if not, why?
No, sorry, I'm maybe expecting some nuance, cerebral. No, absolutely not, and for all the exact same reasons. Engagement is not the same thing as a lifelong covenant. So you have yet to make that covenant. You have hopefully yet to consummate, even sexually, that relationship. And so it's a way of saying, I'm serious, this is it, I want to commit my life to you. But until that wedding day, you have yet to actually make a promise to make a covenant until death do us part. And that, as I said before, that is the container, the only one that's strong enough to handle sexuality. And it's incredible. The vows, in my opinion, are the center of a wedding. I don't officiate very many weddings, and when I do, I just have one or two requirements, and at the top of the list is you have to write your own vows, because this is the center of what a wedding is all about. And if you can't wait a few months between engagement and your marriage, then you're not in love, because 1 Corinthians 13 clearly says that love is patient. Lust is impatient by its very nature. Lust is right here, right now. My body wants what it wants. It's like hunger. It's like thirst. You want it. You want a lot of it. You want it now. Love, on the other hand, is patient. It puts the good of another ahead of your own good. It waiting, and it relishes in that moment of waiting. And there's not, once again, it's not like how far can you go, it's, how soon can you start. So if you're going towards marriage, you have your entire life ahead of you. And just one last thing I'd say is, one of the most important things that you're doing in engagement, dating too, but in particular engagement, is you're building trust. And you're building trust sexually, and you're building trust that this person can keep his or her pants on and stay faithful to you over the lifetime. So, fast forward 10 years into your marriage, if you're the woman, you're pregnant with baby number 2 or whatever, you're, 40 pounds heavier than you were because whatever, you have a child, and your husband's away on a business trip, you want to be able to trust implicitly, that is a man that I know I can trust. I know I can trust him sexually, and vice versa. Guys, if you're not, the Casanova that you once were, and you've written all the poetry and you're fresh out, and you've done every creative idea you can think of. You're we went up in a hot air balloon, but you only do that kind of once. You're not every year I do this romantic thing or whatever, and you're, you don't want to be in that spot where 10 years in you worry, am I enough? Am I spontaneous enough? Am I stylish enough? Am I whatever enough? Will she stay faithful to me, or will she go looking for the next fix, the next thing, the next interest, the next man who makes her feel better than I know how to make her feel? And so trust is the bedrock of a healthy marriage. It's one of, I think, my favorite things about our marriage is we have a lot of stuff that we wrestle with, but I think trust is not one of them, right? I think we deeply, genuinely, authentically trust each other. And that is happening for you right now. If you're dating somebody in particular, if you're engaged, as you're not sleeping together, you're not just not sleeping together, you're building trust.
Yep. Amen.
And I would advocate shorter engagements.
Yes, absolutely.
Just practically. I mean, once you've figured out you want to get married, don't wait around forever to actually get married, because it's hard to stay pure when you're in love.
And
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's good for you to have passion and want to sleep together.
It's good for it to be hard, right?
Yeah, it's super good for it to be hard. But just, don't set yourself up for failure. We're going to be engaged for 2 years. I'm always like, oh gosh.
And
man.
something does, don't you think?
They make movies about that.
Yeah. Don't you think, Tim, something psychologically shifts when you get engaged to where that temptation, which hopefully is already really high, but it goes even higher.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So we're both, this is not a Bible thing, but we're both short engagement people.
Advocates for it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How soon can you plan a wedding? That's my philosophy.
Yes.
Make the wedding small.
Yes.
Right?
I know. My goodness. People always
Seriously,
ask for
but I mean,
no,
people
totally.
they get engaged, and this is LA. We have this thing up in Oregon called seasons.
Right. Yeah, nobody wants to
You've
get
never heard
married
of it.
in
So people want to get married, and we have this
December.
thing called summer, and it's not 12 months long. It's
Yeah.
3 months long. And so people will get engaged in October, but they want an August wedding or whatever. And so, sure, they have 8 months, and they have great wedding photos on their thing, and then they lost all of their sexual purity.
We always say, make it about the marriage, not about the wedding.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
Exactly.
And I mean, what happens when you get engaged is some people start feeling entitled, and that's where that kind of slowly starts to creep in. When we're almost married, it's like when you say
what's the
vows
big
and you
deal?
commit your life to them, publicly and before God, then you're entitled.
We're married in God's eyes.
Yes.
No, you're
Oh, my
sinning
goodness.
in God's eyes. Seriously.
Thank you.
Come on. Maybe you would say that nicer
Yep.
than me.
No,
I know
yes.
you would say that nicer than me.
So given that, though, a lot of questions were, you talked about the line, but how do you pace yourself? How do you pace yourself with physical contact specifically, although you could probably add even emotional boundaries to that as well. How should you go about setting boundaries? What does that conversation look like? There's an engaged couple in the room, and they're not going to get married for 6 months and whatnot, and now they're overthinking whether that's too long or not, but the gate's already set. So what... Or maybe they're not yet engaged. How do you pace yourselves? How do you talk about boundaries?
Well, I mean, first off, I just want to say well done asking that question. The very fact that you're asking it means you're on the right track, So a couple rules of thumb for us, and none of this is going to sound romantic and awesome, but I believe all of this. So first I'd say don't do anything in private that you would not do in public. And that is a good general rule to go by. You know what I mean? So what would you do at a park? Well,
I was going to say, this is LA. This is LA, so
right?
Just,
so maybe that means
remember
absolutely
that.
nothing here, Other thing I would say is this one might sound really out of left field to you. It did when I first heard it, and I believe it now more than ever. I would say never be alone together in an apartment or a house or anywhere with a closed door. So this was basically, somebody said this to us when we started dating, and I thought it was the dumbest, most legalistic, unromantic, old, dumb, stupid idea, and we finally gave into it, and I think it's the reason why our son is 9 and not, 17 right now. It's incredibly difficult to get pregnant when, your future mother-in-law is in the other room next door. What do you guys want for dinner? Oh, nothing right now, we're good. So we just made the decision to never be in my apartment or in her house or anywhere all alone with the door closed. So that meant that we spent a lot of time going for walks in parks. We spent a lot of time at this 24-hour coffee shop that was around the corner or whatever. We spent a lot of time, because it was back in the 90s, Barnes & Noble was a thing, Just don't judge me for my age there, all right? So we spent a lot of time at Barnes & Noble or whatever. And her parents were great. She has great parents, but they didn't really care. And so they'd just leave, we'd be over at their house or whatever. And they're we're going to the grocery store. We'll see you guys later. And so we're great. There goes our night. Let's go to Barnes & Noble again, honey. But we did that. And I just think it has been incredibly helpful. I mean, you want to set yourself up for success, not failure. And we're all wired in different ways. I sexually do not have the self-control with the woman that I love and who's beautiful with my wife I did not at that moment have the self-control to be alone and to trust myself. And so I had to set myself up. I think what a lot of people do is they set themselves up for failure. Like you go over to your apartment, your roommate's gone, candles are on.
The
like
Notebook's on Blu-ray.
Yeah. Beyonce's playing in the background.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, let's just cuddle and pray about our relationship, you know? And it's like, so, I mean, you are doing everything you possibly can to sin. And even if your heart is genuine, like, I really want to be pure, I really want to be holy, it's just not going to happen. And so, like, we laugh at that, but how many people do that? Mm-hmm. And so I think you want to set yourself up for success, not for failure. You know, James in James 1 writes about how each of us is tempted when we are drawn away by our own and evil desires. And then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. So, you know, you hear it said a lot that we don't have a say in temptation, that temptation's not sin, and that's true. Like when you are tempted, for example, to have sex with your boyfriend or girlfriend, that is not a sin, okay? When you act on it, it's sin. But I would also say that we have a say in how much we are tempted based on the environment that we cultivate around our life. Mm-hmm. And so you're gonna have a lot less temptation at Barnes & Noble or whatever the new Barnes & Noble is, you know? Than you will have if you're alone in the bedroom and Beyonce's in the background and the candles are on and like the jacuzzi is going or whatever, you know? And so I would say set yourself up for success, not for failure. And then the last thing I would say is just talk about the line. I just love that question, that how do we talk about it? Talk about it and come to like clear, not fuzzy parameters. Like we really, you know, don't want to have sex. I don't want to have sex either till we get married. Great. Like, no, talk about it. Like, what does that mean? So will we kiss? Will we make out? Will we not make out? What does that look like? Can we kiss on the lips or not? And talk about that line. And then the last thing I would say is bring friends into it. And so where they know. So you have friends that are asking you, how are you guys doing? This is what you said. You guys said this is where you're going to put the boundary. Are you guys living into that? Are you not living into that? And I know this might sound kind of like unromantic, but I think that there's like a missing like generational value. Like if you read literature, even from like the Victorian era or 100 or 200 years ago, like there's something about this that can be incredibly romantic. This idea of like cultivating your relationship as like a work of art and saving yourself and building up to this moment that is the wedding and the wedding night. Like I think there is actually a romantic undertone that we can recapture as a generation. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to say to that or no?
Yeah, and I just think it's good to remember too, like as a woman, I remember struggling some with that when we were engaged, just because your desire is so strong to be with the person that you know, are going to get married to, but reminding myself, I'm saving myself from him for him, so that when we're actually together, there's no guilt, there's no strings attached, there's blessing connected to it. So reminding yourself that, yes, it's like this, you know, few-month period where it's really hard and it takes a ton of self-discipline, but then you have like the next 50 years or whatever where you're going to be making love like all the time. So, you know.
All the time.
So anyways, wow. Okay, so yes.
There's actually a question about that in a minute for you guys. You did mention a lot of sex a lot of times, so I think people are like, what? Define a lot. I don't know if anybody's a Woody Allen fan, but I think it's Annie Hall, but there's this one Woody Allen movie where there's him and his wife are in two different counseling sessions, and they're both like getting therapy, and the therapist goes, how much do you have sex? And the woman's like, all the time. And the guy's like, never. So, I want to, one thought before I want to spend the rest of our few minutes talking about for those who are married, but one thought for those of you who have crossed the line, because I know that thought has come into your heart and mind right now. You're like, we have done that. We've closed the door. We've gone there. We've crossed the line. Repentance should be a beautiful word in your vocabulary.
Yes.
What it means for you today is if you have crossed the line, you need to acknowledge it. And I think that's where a lot of couples go wrong. They just kind of want to like pretend that it didn't happen, or they don't talk about it. Talk about it and acknowledge like we have sinned against the Lord. Again,
and against each other, repent to each other, you know?
We've sinned against God, sinned against each other. Sex is good, but the whole point of what we've been talking about today is it's in the context of marriage. Acknowledge that, but then freely receive the forgiveness that is in Christ Jesus. You are washed clean in the blood of Christ, and then start anew and start afresh. There's no condemnation for those who are in Christ. It's not that that thing wasn't sin. It's that Jesus Christ took your sin so that you can be washed. Just know that if you've crossed the line. The rest of these questions for the next 5, 6, 7 minutes are really about now we are married.
Okay.
What does a wife do when she is overwhelmingly called to live a completely different way? I think this is referring to the garden, gardening and vocation and whatnot. What does a wife do when she is overwhelmingly called to live a completely different way financially? Oh, I didn't notice that last word, financially. Or just in general, there were several questions about what happens when you're at odds with this sense of call. Are you referring to call meaning we're followers of Jesus in a generic sense? Or are you referring to specific vocations when you talk about having that shared calling? What does a person do when they sense a conflict there in marriage?
A person or a woman specifically?
Well, yeah, but there were actually, I think, about 7 questions along the same lines.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to have you speak to that. I mean, I think when I talk about calling, I'm not just saying called to Jesus in the generic sense. We're all called to Jesus. I'm talking more in a vocation or what God's made you to do with your short ration of oxygen called life. I would also talk, I don't mean that in a bad way. Having different callings is not the same thing as having contradictory callings. You know what I mean? So you can have a complementary calling, but not a contradictory calling. So it doesn't mean that you both feel called to ice skating in Helsinki for the glory of God or whatever, It might be incredibly broad.
Oh, that would be amazing.
That was just off the top of my head. That was just, The afternoon is getting late.
Yes.
It's been a long day. And so, I think the first question I would ask is, are your callings at odds with each other? And that's where you have problems, right? They don't have to be the same thing, and often they will dovetail and work together incredibly well, as opposed to being flat out at odds with each other. What would you say to that, babe?
Well, in that question, it sounded like they're already married. So if you're already married and you feel like you're having a hard time partnering with your husband in his vision, I would say for you to spend some time with the Lord, asking him to help you to redefine what your vision looks like partnered with his. So sometimes, if it's a financial thing, maybe there's creative ways for you, to do, maybe start your own little Etsy shop or something where you can have a little bit of extra income where you still get to partner with him or whatever, but you're actually adding financially, or maybe whatever, as far as financially, I don't know how you can add more income for you to help in your family, but I would just say in general, ask the Lord to give you the grace to live the life that he's calling you to. Because even if the husband that you're married to now isn't the husband that maybe you would have chosen had you heard today before you got married, it's the husband you're married to, and it's the husband you've already vowed to stick it out with. So now it's God's will for you to partner together and to adjust each other's, to adjust your calling according to God's calling. I would just say, if you can just get alone, ask God to give you a vision for what your calling looks like paired next to his, then try to have a teachable heart that maybe he would give you some more clarity on what that looks like, and to remember the things about your husband that you ended up falling in love with in the first place. There are things about him that you respect, things you want to get behind. And that doesn't necessarily mean death to your dreams, but it may mean a shift in what your dreams actually pan out like.
Yeah, I would say, as Christians, we need to keep this in mind. The purpose of life is not to accomplish our mission, but God's mission. It's not, here's my life and how does the mission of God fit into that? It's, here's the mission of God and how does my life fit into that? And that's why I actually have grown to love the word submission in the Bible. I just put a hyphen between sub and mission. There's a mission of God, and then my mission is a small part of that, along with all the other humans that are following Jesus. And I would just say that needs to be the posture of your heart. Because so often it just becomes a personal agenda. It's like, wait a minute, I'm a follower of Christ. This is about the kingdom of God. This is not about my ego and whatnot. And so it's like really both the man and the woman need to recognize that and submit to what Scripture has to say. Two more questions specifically regarding intimacy. That's what we have time for. Because there was a mention of, have sex a lot, have sex all the time. So do you have to have sex with your spouse all the time? There's actually a lot of questions here. What if you don't? What if you're struggling with that? What if your spouse doesn't want to have sex with you? Like, how do you navigate, basically, so many questions on that. How do you navigate the difficulties of, one partner is like, I'm really struggling with this, or, define a lot of sex, and like what's healthy, and how do we deal with that?
No, I'm so glad you said that. I mean, when I was joking about that, I honestly was joking, right? And so there is a command in Corinthians for married couples to come together often, is what he says. And he does not define often, he just says often. And even like physiologically, I actually had a really good talk with my doctor about this recently. People are all over the map, seriously. People are all over the map, male and female, in sex drive, and so much of it is based on your physiology, based on your makeup. And so for some people, often is like every other day, and for other people, often is once a week or however often, And so it honestly does depend on how your body is made up or whatever. And so all I would say is often enough that all of your sexual needs are being met by your spouse, and you're not tempted to look anywhere else for them. And so for some of you, that means you need to make love a lot. For others of you, not so much, and you need to feel no guilt, no shame. I know that a lot of people feel all this cultural pressure, in particular if you're a guy. You feel like you just have to, want to have sex twice a day for the rest of your life, even though you're like 73 or whatever. And like there is this cultural pressure. None of that is rooted in reality. None of that is rooted in the Scriptures. All that's right and true is that you are a sexual being. Your sexuality is a part of who you are. God made all of us different, and God created your spouse as that counterpoint to your sexuality. And if one spouse wants to have sex more than the other, then I think that what you want is you ideally want two people following Jesus who are servants not only of Jesus but of one another, and see sexuality not just as a chance to get what I want from somebody, but to serve that other person. You know what I mean? And so when you have one spouse who wants sex more often than the other, that can be an amazing opportunity for two couples to serve each other. Would you agree with that? So I would say one, like...
She's like, no.
No. No. So one, I would just say take all the pressure off of whatever if that word a lot scares you or often scares you, you completely misunderstood me. Take all of that pressure off of you. Two, I would say when your sexual desire is there and you need it to be, you need an outlet for that, you need to make love to your spouse so that you can stay connected. It's not just the sexual piece, like there's the intimacy piece, right. Like something happens when you make love to your spouse. There is like a reconnection. Even if you don't need sex that night or whatever, you might need to reconnect, if that makes sense. Yeah, and then last I just say it's an amazing place to serve your spouse,
That's huge, because it's remembering all that we've talked about today. Sex is more than about sex. Yeah. It really is to be in that moment. It's an expression that should characterize the rest of your relationship. You're like naked, you're vulnerable, you're open, you're intimate, you're one. It's like there's an aspect of even spiritual and emotional health that goes with that goes far beyond just my personal sex drive or their sex drive and whatnot. Yeah. The last question, throw out to you, and then we'll pray and worship before we go. Tammy, how did you practically and spiritually navigate life when times were difficult for you and John Mark? He obviously talked a lot about how difficult he, in fact, is for you. But how did you, there was a lot of questions like, how do you just navigate those times when maybe it's really difficult, your husband or your wife is going through a really difficult season and whatnot? How did you navigate that?
I think I would say when you're very different, specifically like we're total opposites, like he was saying, I think what we have kind of learned is that there's a difference, like your actual makeup and your personality, like who you are. There are certain parts of your personality that will clash against somebody who's a different personality makeup than you, and learning what those personality things are as opposed to like sin. Because when you're wired a certain way, you'll tend to see somebody, like, for instance, I'm laid back and I view myself as like laid back and, or actually, this will be better. John Mark views himself as like assertive and like responsible, and he's very like punctual, and he's sharp. And yeah, and he knows it. And but like somebody of my personality may view him as like bossy and like pushy and like
And what else?
And you know, but like
OCD and pedantic and critical.
but all that to say is those things that
aching her
that he
heart.
sees himself
It's
like,
my chance.
or that maybe my personality sees him different. Those are not those fronts. What he sees are front side strengths. What I'm seeing is maybe backside weaknesses. But what I fell in love with about him is that he was a leader, that he was a man of conviction. He is a man of character. Like, the things I fell in love with are also the things that drive me nuts. You know what I'm saying? Like the backside weaknesses. So if you can, in marriage, learn to what we've kind of come to call make room for each other.
Yeah.
So like, I can be, he's being really sweet in how he talked about me, but like I can be irresponsible. I can be super late and just really late. And so in our home, he makes room for me to operate the household how I want to operate it when I'm home. And when he's gone, you know, like he runs his, you know, whatever. But like we have to come.
His
He's
list.
like, organized or
He's
something.
like organized or something. I don't know. Anyway, so all that to say is we make room for each other and learning to train your brain. I mean, like you actually, this takes self-discipline to remind yourself of the things that you respect about this person, to reiterate in your own mind the like positive things about your spouse. Especially in moments of conflict, to remember that this is not how you're seeing them when you're really frustrated is only one lens. You know, there's also other lenses that you can see that person through that you fell in love with. Obviously, you married them. So I think remembering who they are, remembering that they're in process and that you're in process, and being honest about it. So like we've had to have hard conversations where, you know, it's just like, you know, it's like, this really annoys me about you. And you're like, yeah, it kind of sucks because that's just how I feel like who I am. And then you're like, okay, well, that really annoys me. Okay, how can we make room for each other so that we can operate in our strengths and love each other as we are, and at the same time, like, call each other to be the redemptive version of ourselves. I think remembering that God is always calling us, he sees the best in us, and he calls us to live out that. You know, so when I see my husband, I think he's such a great man, and he's becoming a great man. You know, like calling him out to be that, and just walking through it, like being determined. Well, it is hard right now, but it won't always feel like this. Or what does, you know, you just push through it, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think too, being honest, like about what you need. So like men and women, obviously, we're like really different. So like sometimes I think it's really easy to judge the other person. So like John Mark is, he doesn't need a lot of affection. Like he just doesn't. He's not a touchy-feely guy. I'd be like this, and he'd be like, stop petting me. And I'm like, oh, sorry, but I like that, you know? So being like, hey, you know, good job. So being like, hey, you know, like, I like it. Oh, my goodness. But being like straight up, instead of saying, oh, my husband's so unaffectionate, like he never like loves on me, and I like see these other couples and they love on each other, and it's
gross.
It's just so hard. Instead, just being honest about it and saying,
Says
hey.
the guy who just taught a song.
I know, right? That's not awkward or anything for me when he's teaching that stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways, holy cow. Anyways, I'm just saying, like, to be honest, you know, like, hey, you know, I like it when you hold my hand, or like when you put your arm around me. And every time he does that, even though he doesn't need it, I know he's speaking my language. He puts his arm around me, or he grabs my hand, and I know, oh, he's trying. That's like a good thing to remember. Like, it's
Good job.
he's trying there. And I think that's important in marriage, to keep communicating what you need. If you're a guy and you need more sex, tell your wife, I need to sleep with you more. And she can make a conscious decision in her mind, okay, that's what he needs right now, so I'm going to serve him in that way. And I'm going to just do it, and it's gonna be great. So you just make a conscious decision, just like he made a conscious decision to hold my hand. Like, there are things that you compromise to better the other person and to make your marriage better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Preach it. Well done.
John, Mark,
There's so much
Tammy,
wisdom.
thank you so much
Yeah,
for
man.
just your time and your
Oh,
wisdom.
it's
Let's
so good to be
affirm.
here. So great to be with you guys. It's awesome. Thanks.